Thank you for sticking around. Definitely the best for last, as Vijaya says. We have a great panel as usual. I have a bit of a problem with them, though. Normally, we try to make sure that on this panel, we always get some interesting debates. I won't call them fights, but they're usually interesting debates. But in the chats with the gentlemen outside, I found out that practically every single one of them has done or is about to do a deal with the other. So I'm not sure how well we're going to do. But without further ado, a quick intro. Michael Garin, CEO of Imagination. Not only has he been running Imagination for some time and pioneering the way in terms of Abu Dhabi's involvement in film, but also comes from decades of experience in the media industry, starting from co-founding Lorimar through investment banking and so on. So a lot of perspective. Sam Barnett, been helming the ship at NBC through very interesting waters, and we're very happy to have him with us to give us an idea of where we are and what we stand. Sanjay Reina, who I keep saying called the death of free-to-air television 2 years ago, but denies it. I've been taking care of Fox in the region for a long time. Obviously, we have Disney and Fox happening, so that's going to be interesting to get his perspective. And Maaz Sheikh, of course, in terms of OTT, I think without argument, the most successful attempt at OTT in the region, and first with Stars Play, and he's a founder of Stars Play, so I think we've covered the spectrum. So without further ado, I wanted to start with Sam, with a reference to something you said last year. You made a call for cooperation because at the time you said that the real enemy was the Facebooks and the Googles because they were siphoning digital advertising revenues away from television. You made a call for cooperation to the room. Has anything happened as a result of this call?
It's been an interesting year in our media. I think there has been a lot more recognition that we do need to work together. I mean, Sanjay and I are going to be announcing a deal very shortly with Fox content on Shahid, and I think that is the direction going forward, is that that we will try and consolidate key assets that work in the region, local content, in order to play against FANG. Media is political, and Vijaya will probably shuffle in her seat when I mention the politics word. But around the world, media is political. It helps shape culture, values, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. I was reflecting the other day that if if the film Bohemian Rhapsody had played in 1991 when Freddie Mercury had died, it would be a very different film. And you see how attitudes to certain communities have shifted over the years. And that's a lot about media. So sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad as well. And I think the question with FANG is, yes, you might get more choice, and yes, they might be able to win more advertising, but do the nations in this region want to hand over the media sector to America? And if they do, this is a fantastic way to do this. And just to allow them to come in without regulation, without regulating the content, allowing them to dump advertising, they will succeed. Now, the local media companies will survive. We and NBC will continue to thrive, but we will thrive in a smaller market than would otherwise be the case. So I think regulators face a big question about what they want to continue. And in the past, they've tended to regulate what they can see, the newspapers, the TV station, and they've let, therefore, the foreign media companies come in over the top and essentially unregulated. And I think whether you think that's good or bad or fair or not fair, that is going to have significant implications for media in the Middle East.
Okay. We're going to cover the topic of government's role in media and the regulating, but I just wanted to follow up on a point. So you made this call. You're doing a deal with Sanjay. Sanjay, despite your denials, you were not very bullish on free-to-air, but you are still playing in it. Do you see, it's very clear, Sam states a very clear case about how the sector should cooperate and work together. do you see enough impetus? I mean, if the result of the largest broadcaster in the region saying we should all work together is one deal with Fox, does this mean that the industry as a whole does not have a common view on this threat that Sam just articulated?
I am not a spokesman of the industry. I can speak on behalf of Fox. We were absolutely thrilled when we started talking to Sam and his team. And incidentally, it's not a deal with me, it's a deal with Fox. So, and the kind of cooperation and assistance we got in putting the things together demonstrates clearly that in the coming times, in the coming arenas, you would need to locally contribute your energies towards achieving the larger goal, which is taking care of this disruptive consumer who's staring you at your face and telling you that I need to be treated differently now, right? Because the consumer is now at the center stage. It is no longer producing a channel, producing a platform, putting it there, and then hoping in hell that somebody will come in and buy. The consumer has suddenly kind of become center stage. And we should all realize that. And I think between Shahid.net and us, the coming together of content, local, international, synergies, National Geographic, Arabic, English, this all hints towards the fact that there has to be an utmost cooperation at that level, at the local level,
yes,
which attracts the consumer.
Nobody's disagreeing, but
yeah,
it's not actually happening. So why isn't it happening?
It's not happening because
what's missing?
I have always said, and I can maintaining that, MENA is a region all in our mind. These are 24 different countries with 24,000 kinds of egos and issues and regulations and political affiliations and so on and so forth. So even if 3 or 4 people come together and form a grand alliance, grand consortium, that is good enough. Why should you worry about not too many people joining hands?
Do we have a grand alliance?
The biggest is in the town next to me, MBC. Nobody goes bigger than that. We are a fairly large international player. The two of us have met. We found common ground, and we have attracted attention to each other. Maybe somebody else also comes on board, but I think this is a great hint to people that come together. There is the consumer wanting to know what we are going to offer him or her.
Maz, I think you're not going to argue with the point that the consumer is asking for something different, so that's for sure. That was the impetus behind.
I will argue with that. Let Maz go
Which is
first.
why I wanted to get back to, because basically Sanjay just basically said that what you believe in terms of a distribution model is not what the consumer is asking for, so that's going to be interesting.
After
but let Maz come in and
no, I didn't say
reinforce
anything
the
about
case.
consumer wanting something else. And I have never said that free-to-air is dead. These are ridiculous statements.
Fake news.
Yeah? It's called fake news. And we all know how fake news travels. Nothing is dead, no corpses, and no coffins.
Maz, so do you, from what you're seeing happen, so obviously you started Stars Play some time ago. It's developed a lot. The market has developed. Lots of new entrants came in, not only on the OTT pure play side, but a lot of the broadcasters, or some of them, are reacting and reinforcing their positions, whether it's NBC, OSN had attempts and so on. Fox has announced an OTT play. And do you think that we're getting to the point where you, as a pure play OTT company, have to worry that the broadcasters finally get it and they're going to do the right thing in terms of giving the consumer, quote unquote, what he wants, as Sanjay says? Or is there room for both of you to play, or how do you view it?
So we've always felt that us being a pure play is in fact our biggest strength. In terms of technology, premiumness of the content, and the overall experience. I think we might be a few years behind Netflix, but we are light years ahead of any other technology in the region. So I like to think that pure play has always been our strength. And our consumers have also responded and appreciated that it's been a pure premium experience with the latest content, ads-free, and a brand that is now established in the region. So I think that's been our strength, and we'd like to maintain that strength and maintain that focus. For us, the opportunity is to expand further in MENA and also expand beyond MENA into
But are you waking up at night and thinking, oh my God, Shahid Plus is going to kill me?
There's, look, I think this is not a market where only one service is going to take it all, right? I think Netflix is definitely a global brand and a global powerhouse. Shahid is very, very strong in its brand, in its presence, in Arabic content. We have carved out our niche on premium Hollywood, including some of the content that Sanjay is nice enough to share with us when he likes.
Sharing content with you, sharing content with Sam.
He's, so we like to think that our strength has been on premium Hollywood. When we survey our customers, almost 40% of our customers also subscribe to Shahid Plus.
But is that because you're getting a different set of customers? Because if you look at general viewership data, it's saying the opposite. It's saying that even on premium pay TV services, the biggest viewership is channels like NBC. So how come your viewers have a different preference? Is it because they're a different subset?
Well, the demographics are very, very different, right? So our customers, a lot of them have grown up on demand. 70% of our audience is under 25. So it's a very different demographic. They are not as loyal to the traditional established brands. They're loyal to Netflix. They might be loyal to YouTube and Snapchat. And we are their new brand that they're experiencing.
Okay.
So to me, when you look at the viewership data on OSN set-top box for OSN's channels versus NBC channels is very different comparison than someone tuning into an Android phone or an iPhone and watching content on it. Two very different audience.
Okay. We'll get back to where they're watching, but basically I want to get back to Sam a little bit. So if I can summarize what Sanjay and Maz are saying, they're basically saying you're giving only old people what they want, and you're not giving the young people what they want, and you're basically going to become obsolete very quickly, is what I'm hearing.
Okay, do any of you know the UK TV market? If you do know it, think about what were the big hits, what were the big media hits over the last 3 or 4 months. So after the Royal Wedding and the World Cup, which were both on TV, you had Love Island, which was a reality show which kind of captured the imagination. It wasn't particularly Hadafi. It wasn't purposeful content, but it was very popular. And then you had Bodyguard, which was a drama series on BBC, which had the largest ratings ever on Sunday night. All TV. And that was the UK, where the broadband penetration is much bigger, the Netflix penetration is much larger, and still you have TV as a clear leader in media consumption.
If I may,
now, if I move to the Middle East,
declining.
You're talking a lot. If you move to the Middle East, we are still getting 100 million plus audiences on many of our large shows, and you do not get that level of penetration on other media. When we don't run a series on TV and just put it on Shahid, we get dramatically less audience on the Shahid than when we create the awareness on television. I think the TV case is very clear. That's not to take away anything from what Maz has said or Sanjay has said, but TV continues to be strong. Advertising is a different matter, but the actual views continue to be very strong.
Okay.
I was going to hint to that. I think a lot of so-called epitaphs are being written because there is a general downturn in advertising around either the region or around the world. And because of that one currency dipping and going somewhere else, people are making all sorts of statements that this form of consumption of content is dying and this form is closer to death and so on and so forth. I think we have to keep that animal out of the room. Advertising is a different animal that needs to be tackled differently. But as far as viewership is concerned, and I knew this answer will come because I'm being accused of having made those statements, there is a clear 3-year data in my pocket which clearly shows that linear television is static, growing, doing very well. And NBC continues to
what's
be
the
at the
source
numbers
of
as they are.
Sanjay made this morning.
So it's Ipsos. So where are these people? Who are these people? They don't discontinue themselves from watching large format called television.
What did you mean when you said we have to give the audience what they want? What did you?
No. The point is there is a set of audience that is today demanding an attention differently from that was, and that audience also resides in the same households as 60 million other television households in the Arab world reside.
Okay, but if you look at network television in the US, the average viewership age, frequently quoted, I think the youngest one is 56 and the oldest one is 65 average age. So this says, if you look at the UK market, the average amount of viewers to a television show, yes, television by far is still reaching, and yes, even in projections, it's still a big chunk of the market. Nobody's disputing that, but you as people who are come from the quote-unquote traditional, to what extent are you thinking ahead in terms of how you're preparing yourselves? Because at some point, if we look at the demographics, a declining live or linear viewership, yes, advertising is cyclical, fine. But also when you look at younger people, the way they consume media is very different, and they're going to grow up. Is there an assumption that when they grow up, it's all going to be the same again? Or are you changing how you're planning ahead for the future? So for example, WWE is hedging their bets. I'm licensing content, but I create my own service. Disney is launching a direct service, while it still has many licensing distributions in place. So what are you doing about preparing for this? Or do you see the future any different, or is it more of the same, basically?
You should be on the panel.
No, I like to talk. Only child syndrome, it happens a lot.
Mind that he's a consultant now. He's writing a paper.
We are doing two things. So we believe whatever happens, it's going to be about local. NBC will win if we produce the best local content. We have just launched NBC Studios, where we intend to dramatically increase the quantity and quality of both drama and film. And that will both fuel our TV stations and will also fuel the expansion and growth of Shahid. And of course, if a particular demographic or a segment wants to watch on a particular technology, we will provide that as we have always done. I don't think that's a particularly controversial or interesting topic. We'll do that. Can we do that? And can local content compete against international quality content? I think it can, and relevance continues to be extremely important. I think the challenge for us as a pan-Arab group is can we both get local enough to get that relevance and make sure that we also continue to keep our pan-Arab audiences, and we're developing various strategies for that as we go. So develop the content and then invest significantly in the development of the platforms.
Do you see any point in the next 5 years where the majority of your audience and or revenue is coming from the on-demand component, or do you see it remaining a linear, mostly a linear-dominated
TV exec saying that TV is strong is not going to be breaking news. But we have had a cyclical downturn in advertising. I think you probably couldn't find a worse situation to be in with war and oil prices and etc. So from here on, I think it gets stronger. I was talking to a car manufacturer on Sunday evening who said that October sales were better than September sales, and that was the first time that had happened for about 18 months. We are seeing in Egypt that advertising has come up. The devaluation kind of, again, hit the floor, and based on that one, we're seeing advertising coming up. So we are seeing green shoots, and I think advertising will come up, and that continues to be a huge portion. Sheikh Waleed has commanded that we move aggressively into OTT, and I have large targets. My job is to make sure Maz is scared of Shahid Plus, and that's a big job. But we intend to expand Shahid and Shahid Plus significantly.
Okay. Michael, if I can come to you a little bit from your perspective, you basically are interested in creating great content with partners and pushing it out into the audiences, if I can summarize that. So all this tension that's going on between traditional, linear, non-linear, I suppose for you is a point of strength, not a point of weakness or uncertainty. Do you have more buyers from outside the region because there's OTT interest?
Well, I don't think that's the way to really think about ImageNation, because we're not a seller. We're here to make everybody on this panel successful, and to make sure that when the kind of production companies that these fellows need to come here and produce the quality of content that they want to see, that they have the confidence to come here. You know, we're working Netflix, Amazon, very reluctant to work in this area. It doesn't have the best reputation in the world. And because they now have started working with us and through us, they will be ready to do productions that they may not have otherwise been prepared to do. The only time ImageNation really ever does something is when there's nobody else here to do it, and then we're here to demonstrate that it can be done. So when we did our court show, which I refer to as LA Law meets Dallas in Abu Dhabi, basically at that time when we started working on it, almost all the program resources were spent in 1 month, the month of Ramadan. We went to the leadership of Abu Dhabi. We got them to subsidize this program because it was not commercially viable. Because we wanted to demonstrate two things. We wanted to demonstrate that, number one, that this region was capable of producing at a level of quality that it's never seen before, and didn't actually believe it was capable of creating. And secondly, that there were 11 other months of the year where eyeballs were available, and if eyeballs come, the revenues will follow, the cyclicality aside. So we've done that, and now there are a lot of other series that we don't have to be involved in, because our role is not to build ImageNation, our role is to build the nation. And I've said this in several interviews, so it sounds very trite, but I think, you know, I've been here now for long enough that I think people understand this. The biggest success ImageNation will ever have is when this industry is self-sustaining and viable, and there's no need for ImageNation, and we close up shop. What other organization looks forward to the day that they disappear? But that is, in fact, what our role is here. So we're not here to sell anything. We're here to help people achieve what they want to accomplish.
Okay, I want to pick up on one of your points with Sam. So mentioned that we need to produce something. They had to produce it because it was commercially non-viable. And I know you've had very strong opinions before about sort of non-commercial involvement in the sector. So are we really at the point where to produce a good piece of content, it requires a non-commercial player to do so first? Or is it the fact that there's so many non-commercial players that's getting us to the point? You know, is it the chicken or the egg?
I think the market is big enough to sustain good quality commercial content. The question is, if we want to grow it, particularly in terms of the OTT, then we're going to have to fuel it with good quality content, and so we'll need more. Potentially, again, most media companies around the world will have lost leaders on huge series, and we will do that. We will continue to be commercially successful because of that. We'll balance that out with content that costs less and still brings in huge ratings.
But if other players are producing content without expecting a return, does that help you or hinder you?
That's a problem. And I think pay TV has been caught in this vice between be in and be out. One side paying vastly too much for content, and the other side paying nothing. And so that they've just been caught in the middle, and that's a very difficult place to be, because non-commercial players crowd out the people who are applying commercial rigor and doing all the right things, and I think that's a great shame.
I mean, if we were, you know, there are other sectors like the UK where the public sector broadcaster has a particular role to play but allows competition. Is that possible in our region? Because there's a lot of media companies that are government-owned that continue to play a pseudo-commercial role. Should there be a clear classification of the two or a limiting of the role of one for the sector to grow as a whole, or should it be, may the best one win?
A question from Maz?
Maz would like you all to do so he can get more subscribers.
Our view is actually very simple. We see NBC beaming into 60 million homes every night and doing so very, very successfully for the last 15 years. And on the other extreme, we see OSN with very, very premium content, hundreds of channels, and there's a gap in between, right? And we're filling in that gap between the number of subs that OSN has and the 60 million homes that NBC beams into every day. And we believe there's an opportunity for premium content. We happen to start with Hollywood because the value proposition and propensity to pay and ability to pay was already established on Hollywood. So for us, we saw a path to the first 500,000 customers through Hollywood. That doesn't mean that's our end-all and be-all in the long run.
Okay, but it's all good. But let's say tomorrow, a government-owned media company decides it wants to make a Stars play, and it goes to the same Hollywood people you go to and starts bidding against you.
Right. So that won't be the first time it's happening, right? No. It was happening against OSN, it was happening against NBC. Okay. So people who have deep pockets will always try to do that. Okay. But I have seen a big shift in the last 5 years in I don't see that happening anymore. Even your major telecom operators are beginning to work with the platforms as well as NBCs and Foxes of the world to create OTT services. Okay. So I think that is happening less and less. I think the long term, to Sam's point, I agree with, which is in order to truly dominate this region, beyond just 1 million subscribers, I think one needs to get into Arabic content and localized content. So whether it's taking Hollywood and localizing it more, or original Arabic, which NBC is doing with its own original shows, or what Michael does at Image Nation, I think that is the future to truly dominate the service in the long run.
And if I could just add that this, in fact, has been the history of our industry everywhere in the world. I've been doing this for quite a while, so I was around when virtually all European primetime schedules of the #1 channel were US television series. And then in the late 80s and the early 90s, we started seeing the introduction of regulation that demanded a certain amount of primetime be for local content. The studios hated it because they were dumping all their series, selling it below the cost of manufacturing, so the true definition of dumping. And the broadcasters loved it because they were able to put programs on that were cheaper than making it. But the shock that the broadcasters who came to the party kicking and streaming experienced was that local audiences prefer local content to international audiences. And they got higher ratings and higher revenues that came with those higher ratings. So the commercial broadcasters were more profitable than they ever were before when they were buying cheaper programming. And today, the only US television series that's on a #1 channel anywhere in the world is CSI. All the other network shows run, but they run on the secondary or tertiary channel. So this is the story of content development all over the world. We're just the last place for it to hit.
Yeah.
I think, Karim, one has to also understand that in all this so-called melee and all this disruption of sorts, what is really happening around the world is that the time for creating better content, more content, is actually taking center stage. Content producers today are more busier than they ever were. And all the new age over-the-top operators are announcing 6 billion deal, 7 billion deal, 8 billion into production, and so on and so forth. The point is, more content is getting produced in China by us at Fox than ever was. If that was not true earlier, it's true now. We're producing much more content in India through Star than we ever have. and look at what we have done in those markets. Unfortunately, a lot of this new age, hitting the old age kind of a theory is also being seen by its so-called damage in certain limited markets. So US becomes the barometer of, oh, if OTT, SVOD is working there, everywhere else also is the same. But that's not true. I mean, you can't imagine the dominance of linear television in India. You just can't wish it away. It's in your face. AVOD through Hotstar is doing fantastically well in terms of numbers. Look at China, look at Southeast Asia. In Indonesia, 220 million people. And the amount of free-to-air television they consume, the amount of content they consume. I think it's the right time for a lot of people to stand up and say, this is the age of content, and content is going to be center stage. Secondly, what I really like is data is driving a whole lot of consumption, and true data is coming out. So we must also give credit where it is due. A lot of AI, a lot of recommendation engines, algorithms are possible through such platforms which earlier were not. And we must accept it that that is the new age consumer that we have to tackle. So that's where the whole story is kind of moving towards.
Okay, so if we take that line and say, okay, it's the time where content is the key differentiator, and content requires obviously investment. In other markets that have healthier, and we're not only talking about the cyclicality of advertising, we're talking about the fact that we all agree the market here is undervalued, even at an advertising level. You've both spoken to this before. Are you in a position to afford to increase the investment in content to compete in this new age? Or do we need something structural to change in the sector to allow you to do that?
No, NBC has been commercial for 27 years. We've been profitable for as long as I've been there. And we have built up a fund to fight uncertainty and to fund investment. And we've never been shy of making bids on things. We're launching Little Big Shots next week, which is a great new kids show. We are launching a poetry show in the next couple of weeks. So we're continuing to put money on things. The advertising numbers are down, but we're still paying our way, and we will continue to be healthy. It is true that we have a 50% market share in Saudi Arabia of audience, and we probably have a larger share of TV advertising. So we are in a privileged position. I suspect for some of the smaller players, life is more difficult. But for NBC, we're fine.
If there's a lot of talk about the impact of, it's far off, but the impact of 5G on distribution, on being able to recreate sort of, individual markets as opposed to satellite feeds that we have right now. Do you foresee a time where 5G or any other technology that gets deployed would then switch you to a sort of a more of a paid, not pay TV, but a scenario like the US where there's cable, but even the free-to-air channels get money from retransmission fees, and then you have UAE and the Saudi being separated as markets, for example, from an advertising perspective. Is that in the thinking, or would you prefer it to be as is because it gives you an advantage?
One of the problems with the satellite always was when we would get paid for one eyeball in Saudi, and we would give another 12 eyeballs for free as people watched us in Iraq and Algeria and Mauritania and so on. And we moved to spot beams so that we could move away from North Africa. We launched Egypt so we could have a channel in Egypt, and there will be more to come. Whether we use satellites or we use other technology, Eutelsat and Arabsat are developing now much tighter spot beams. If you use satellite in Europe or America, they have much tighter spot beams, and that's a potential solution as well. So I remain agnostic on the technology. Whatever works, we will use.
Okay. If we can switch a little bit to OTT, going back to Maz. So obviously, NBC is, Sam said NBC is going to put more effort into Shahid. Sanjay has, they did a deal now for OTT, but there's also, the Disney OTT coming, which may or may not have an impact on Fox. With all these sort of content and aggregators having their own OTT routes to market, how do you foresee competing for content and for subscribers?
Sure. So, OTT, just like any other business, is an execution game. And it's not only about content, It's about the overall experience that the customer gets. It's about distribution. It's about payment options. So we see it. We see ourselves not as an entertainment company. We see ourselves as an e-commerce digital company, and that's a learning that we had 2 years ago, because we were trying to be an entertainment company and we realized that we were struggling. So to me, it's an execution game, and it covers many facets. And we are firm believers in the fact that the more Netflix goes into original content, the more Sam does original Arabic, it's going to leave some room for smaller players like us to go deals with Warner, do deals with Fox, do deals with Disney. And we'll also make some attempts at 1 or 2. We're not going to produce 20 shows, but we will take a cut at doing 1 big show a year, or maybe 2, what we can afford. So we do think that the more Netflix goes into its own original shows that are catering to a global audience, it leaves opportunity for us to go acquire the next big Hollywood show. And it's been happening, and we've done that. Each year we show 40 TV shows from Hollywood that are day and date with their US broadcast, only on Stars Play, not on Netflix, not on any other service. So we've proven that with Hollywood, and we think we can continue to do that. But at the same time, I think we need to enter original Arabic market, and we won't do the big volumes that MBC can afford, but we're trying to figure out our niche. So does Disney launching its own service in end of 2019 or 2020 worry us? Yes, it worries us, but at the same time, I think they're focused on US, they're focused on UK, and luckily there's a lot more studios in Hollywood, so we'll continue to survive and grow.
Sanjay, are you going to leave room for Stars Play to grow?
That aside, whether anybody survives or not is only nobody can predict. We as Fox see ourselves as a pure content company, and these questions have more been answered over the last couple of years than ever. National Geographic as a brand, FX as a brand, Fox as a brand have finally emerged as true content powerhouses. And I think in all this, again, in all this disruption that you are seeing now and in future, and everybody coming onto the board, the basic fact will remain that those who produce great content will find ways to survive, either through platforms or on their own. And as long as you have that data coming back and telling you this is the kind of content, this is the trend, I think we are in the game. Look at National Geographic kind of content. Today, that content is heavily watched on OTT services, which was not the case 1 year back. Because people have started looking at documentaries and people have started looking at lifestyle television, and that's great consumption. So again, forget the power of National Geographic, it's the pure content that goes in there. So we see ourselves as a content company. We align with all great players. Stars Play is a brilliant brand. The way Maz and team have created it, kudos to them. And I don't think we should ask about questions of survival. We should see questions of alliance and questions of growth, and that's what we here are for. Sounds very good.
It sounds very good. There was somebody on another panel saying theory is wonderful, but it's practice that...
No, but we also have a relationship with Maz's team through syndication. We give them content, and they're very happy with it.
Okay, so there's a lot of talk about convergence in other markets for different reasons. We've had a bit of a disastrous attempt at a telco getting into media in Saudi with sports for various reasons. But if there's an OTT pure play like Stars Play, is it more likely for you to be able to compete if you were part of a telco? And from the perspective of the broadcasters, are telcos enemies or partners for you at this stage in the thinking? But we'll start with...
Sure. So the answer to the first one is very easy. Being owned by one telco means that it makes it very difficult for us to work with other telcos. Today, we're partnered and integrated with 21 different telecom operators in the MENA region. Besides Shahid, no one else has that kind of scale of integrations. And the reason we're able to do that, Shahid does it because they're part of MBC. We did it in 3 years because we're independent, we're neutral. And I think this is the challenge you've had in the past. If you're owned by one telecom operator, how do you go work with someone else? So I like to think that staying independent and not being owned by a telecom operator is extremely important if you're going to have the distribution reach in the region.
Okay.
As far as we are concerned, we have amazing relationship with the telcos in the region. I can name Etisalat, Do, STC. We give them our linear products. We used to give them a lot of non-linear too at some point of time. My greater question today is, there should have been a telco guy on this panel, because that is one area where there's a lot of things which are wanting. And I'm not going to teach anybody his business tricks, but the fact is that the video strategy of a lot of telcos leaves a lot to desire for. A lot of us, when we talk about MENA region, go into territories where there is little penetration of pay television. Your first alliance would have been with the telco, and most of the telcos aren't ready. And I'm not talking of the 3 names that I have taken. I'm saying a lot of others aren't ready in those regions. And the telcos need to get up and say, we have a wanting market, a desirable market that we can tap. But the current 3-4 relationships I think we are just seeing great success in those 3.
But could you name any place in the world where telcos have succeeded in their entertainment strategy?
You're right. And more as we move from 4G to 5G, those things are, pardon my language, nakedly visible in front of you. You have to do something to your business model to kind of take advantage of that 5G module that we have been talking about.
But, sorry Sanjay, but I think you're beginning to see that with telcos. So 5 years ago, if they had to put linear channels on their IPTV, it was much more complex. But now, with them rolling out these new Android set-top boxes and being able to put, whether it's Shahid or Stars Play or Netflix, whichever app they want on their set-top box, in a way they're accepting the fact that the branded services are much more recognized and established versus launching their own OTT services. So you're beginning to see that from all major telecom operators.
Okay. Just an admin checkpoint. Vijaya, I know we started a bit late, but do we still have to end at 4:15? That's not fair. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so just moving to another topic, which is basically the impact of what's going on in the Saudi market, to start with Michael. So obviously the Saudi, through Vision 2030, there's a lot of interest in investing in the sector, from infrastructure to content to distribution to talent and so on. Is this an opportunity or is this a threat?
A threat to whom?
Let's talk to you as Imagination or to Abu Dhabi government, whichever you'd like to
again,
answer.
Imagination is not a company. So our job, we're working with the General Entertainment Authority, working obviously very closely with NBC, working very closely with General Cultural Authority, and we're working very closely with Nabras. My own personal view is that the UAE alone is too small to support a sustainable film and television industry. With 1 million Emiratis and 10 million total population, it's impossible, especially as you've heard from the other 3 panelists. The strategy is increasingly going to be dependent on creation of excellent local content. But it's far advanced in terms of production and broadcast and distribution expertise. And so my ideal scenario is to trade the experience and skill set of the UAE for the 32 million population and create a regional solution to the creation of a self-sustaining industry. Because Saudis can do it on their own, there's no question. But they're in a hurry, and they can't do it as fast because, as I have said when I met with all these leaders, you can pay Vox and AMC to build a movie theater. You can book a movie from Fox or Paramount or Universal, and you can pay Six Flags to build a theme park. You can make a deal with the government to build a museum. You can bring Cirque du Soleil to put on. And all this is actually what they should be doing first, because it shows evidence of their intention. It gives people immediate gratification. But what you can't buy, and you can't do in any compressed period of time, is build local capabilities. It's taken us 8 years, and we're barely at a point where we have people who can write a full script here, who can direct a full-length television series. This takes a lot of time. And so I think that as the people that, or the decision makers who know little about our industry, unfortunately this is a problem of our region, with people making decisions about our industry who know nothing about the things they're making decisions of, as they're beginning to understand that, yes, we want Emiratis to fly Etihad planes and Emirates planes, but we're not going to put them in the cockpit because they're Emiratis. We're going to train them, and when they're qualified, they'll fly the aircraft as they are doing today. Well, our industry is no different. We need the same technical and creative skills that people have nurtured and developed all over the world. And that doesn't happen overnight. So if the Saudis really want a genuine solution, they're going to have to do the things that they can pay for and get immediate gratification today, and invest in the things that require patience and time. And I think that if we can do that, we'll have an industry that will rival Europe and Asia and every place else in the world where that formula has been ultimately the leading people to success.
Sam, obviously NBC Studios is looking to capitalize on the changes in Saudi, and so that's an opportunity. But at the same time, we've had examples of SBC specifically mentioning NBC when they were talking about how they outbid you or whether they took away a series from you. And we have other talk about, I think it's called Vibes now, sort of a launch of a government-backed but semi-private media, a competitor. So putting those two in the scales, are you coming out favorably in terms of what's going on in Saudi as an opportunity for NBC, or do you have to worry about more?
No, for sure. Look, we have 400 Saudis working for us. We have Al Sadaf, which is a Saudi production company. We've been doing an events in Saudi since 2007. What the opening up does, it creates a few more competitors, and good luck to them. When we did Arab Idol, we did casting in 30 different towns and cities across the Arab world, and not one in Saudi Arabia. That's changed. And when we do our talent shows going forward, now we will be going and including Saudi in that. We're doing events across the kingdom, so we're we're able to engage the country in our media, and that, I think, makes it more relevant and more exciting. And as I say, we have a lot of Saudis working throughout the organization, and they've been training with us. We're a local company. I'm a Brit sitting here, but I have 10 directors reporting to me who are all from the region, and we have very few expats. NBC is a great local company, and it's a great Saudi export, frankly. And I think I said last year that NBC was a jewel in a crown, and it continues to shine brightly.
So I'd just like to, if I can get like 1 or 2 sentences from each of you, sort of on your outlook. We'll take it sequentially. Outlook for the market, for the industry, for the next 5 years, starting with Michael.
It's very optimistic, because I think what you heard here is that everybody, regardless of technology and the business model they operate by, are committed to increase the quality of content. And this is an industry that's content-driven.
Okay.
Positive. We're going gangbusters on new content and platforms, and watch Little Big Shots on Friday night.
Sanchi.
Content company, we are very, very gung-ho, and I think sky's the limit, starting with NBC Shahid.
It's turned into a Disney movie all of a sudden. It's all like happy ending and walking into the sunset. Okay, man.
Hopefully a lot of growth to come, and I hope Shahid doesn't keep me up at night. So No, but we're very optimistic about the market and about the region. And Netflix is going to give us all a hard time, and they're here to stay. But hopefully we continue to survive.
Right. And if I could just add, since Sam reminded me, I also have a plug to give, which is our newest movie, which is a movie that I hope all of you will go see, Shabab Shiab, premiere Sunday, and will be in movie theaters starting next week. And it will show you what the great movie that can be produced in this region looks like. I think you'll really enjoy it.
There you go. Positivity all round from industry leaders, so that should give us hope in gloomy times. If I could have a round of applause, please, for our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.